This is a conversation with Jim Tom Trent for the Kentucky Marriage Equality and Religious Liberty Oral History Project. We are in the City Council Room of City Hall, located in Rowan County, Kentucky. It is 10 o'clock on May 22nd, 2017. My name is Dakota Barr. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to meet with me today.
It's okay, Dakota. I think this is a very important program you got going, and I'd like to contribute to it.
Okay. I'd like to start with some biographical information, if you will, such as where you were born and where you grew up.
I was born in Morehead, Kentucky, 50 years ago. Just had my 50th birthday, and I don't feel a day over 63. But went to school here at Rowan County High School, went to Morehead State University, and was fortunate enough to go to law school at Chase College of Law. And but my entire family's from Rowan County.
Okay. How has Morehead changed since you were younger?
Oh gosh, it's changed in a lot of ways, and in a lot of ways it's changed. It stayed the same. It's changed in that it's grown. We just had the hospital built just a few years before I was born. The university has continued to grow. We've got a lot more industry than what we had before. We were pretty much an agriculture town. We did a lot of tobacco farming and a lot of different products, and now we've got a lot of industry that has moved in. Again, the university's continuing to grow. The Space Science Center's phenomenal. The hospital's continuing to grow with the Share building. When I was born, there wasn't even the connector, as we call it, and there was just a little road out through there because the highway just came in right around the time I was born. So that whole area was just farmland, and I can't remember a lot of that. I just my family, but just the things I can remember. You drive around downtown. Oh, that used to be there. That used to be there. So there's been a lot of growth, and that part has changed. The part that really hasn't changed is it's still a good hometown, small town feel. The people, you still have that vibe where it's very welcoming to be here, and you feel like people pass you on the street and they say hi, and they're very giving. Any kind of cause we have that requires people to come together, this community is unbelievable. So that's one of the reasons why I stay here. I grew up here. I've lived in Cincinnati and Lexington, and still like to visit those places. But that's the thing that draws me back here is the fact that the people and the culture and everything. It's just you can always go home, they say, and I'm very proud to be mayor here in my hometown.
Can you tell me a little bit about some of the childhood experiences that you went through here? Yeah,
I was very active in sports. My father was a teacher and a coach and an administrator for 44 years in the school system. My mother worked for Dr. Louise Cottle, who, I don't know if you know this or not, but a lot of people do. A lot of people don't associate, but St. Clair is named after her. Her name was Claire Louise Cottle, and she was a regent. So I grew up in her doctor's office. When my dad wasn't coaching, I was with my mother at Louise Cottle's office, which the office is still there, but it's a different business there now. And just very active. Played every sport coming. Was always outside. We talk about your smartphone or smartphones nowadays. Well, we didn't. It wasn't even video games then. Atari wasn't even around then, and you had three television stations. So with it being May now, when school was out, my mother said, "I don't want to see you till dark." And so you were outside playing, and never was a fisherman, but we always hiked and played made up games and all that. So it was a really nice place because with the lake and all the different outdoor activities, it was great. Indoor activities was during school. My dad was a coach, so I was at every game. I grew up in the gym half the time, the other half time in doctor's office. So it was just it was a really good childhood. It's just me and my brother. He's younger than me, and he's a policeman here now at Morehead State University, getting ready to retire actually. So it was I learned from my parents and being in the service industry, working with the public. That's where I've led me to where a lot of my jobs have gone, and ended up here with me being the mayor. Culmination of a lot of things, but we always joke. My dad says, talking about teaching and all that, and where I'm in public service now and have been for several years, you don't get into public service to get rich. You get into public service to enrich. And because of that upbringing, and being in this town and everybody helping everybody, I just felt like, growing up, you just felt it was Mayberry. I mean, you went to everybody's house, and if you want to drink a water and those type of things. And I think we've gotten a little bit out of that because people are so spread out. But for the most part, those are some of the best memories I had was playing with neighborhood friends.
Did you ever expect, growing up, that you would get into this life of a local politician?
Well, it's interesting. When I was in high school, I was always involved with student government. Me and some friends were always involved. I was actually student government president for all 4 years, or class president all 4 years, I should say, and shared it with one of my best friends my senior year. And got to college, and I was involved with college politics, but I never had really been involved in real world politics. I always voted. My grandfather, who's 92 and still living, him, my grandmother, the day I turned 18, he marched me right to the courthouse and said, "You're going to be a voter," which I take very, very much pride in that. And I don't know. It's one of those things. I went to law school to be a lawyer, and halfway through law school, I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer. But I went ahead and graduated, and I've used that degree for different things, and helping people and being in some sort of public service, I like that. With all the different jobs I've had, from working with the school system as the youth service center coordinator for the middle school, I did that for several years. Worked as a recreation department over here for 4 years, over all the programs, Little League committee. I mean, all these different things I've done have been usually youth, involved youth. I've been a youth basketball coach, official, for 25 years, So all those type of things just kind of naturally led to that, and the opportunity arose. And probably when I was 10, I thought I was mayor of Morehead. I always thought it was cool. That's got to be a cool job. And then to end up being that, it's in a weird way. It never was a goal growing up, but it's almost like a dream come true in a way. I know that sounds funny. Real quick story on that. The mayor several years ago, his name was John Will Holbrook. And John Will, back then, it was part-time mayor. It's only been a full-time mayor. I'm only the fourth full-time mayor. The rest of everybody else was all part-time. Anyway, he had a very successful company downtown that ended up burning called Imperial Cleaners. Everybody knew it. Well, his son's name was Jim Tom. My father and him were best friends. My father was a little younger than him, and my father coached his son, and he actually has 2 other sons, but I was named after his son. And ironically, he was mayor. I ended up being mayor, and after he passed away, when they sold his house, his other son, who's a major league umpire, Sam Holbrook, a very good friend, played basketball for my dad and everything, and we know him very well. He gave me the key to the city that his dad had years ago, cut out of aluminum, big old key. So it's the same one I ceremonially present to people when they come in. So I think it's a kind of a neat thing where never thought about it at the time. Very respectful man, knew him all my life, and it's just kind of ironic how that ended up, and just how God puts things that you don't expect, but puts you in positions to where you can be successful. So I never dreamed of doing it, but it's almost a dream come true in the end, if that makes any sense.
Lots of little small connections in the small town.
It's crazy. It's crazy. You sit back and you look at all the, what do they call, 7 degrees of separation? I don't know. It's when you start counting back all the connections, it's crazy.
Mm-hmm. All right, so just tell me a little bit about some of your favorite experiences as mayor, or some of the most troubling experiences as mayor that you've had. Well,
a favorite experience is when you help people. When I took over, one of the first things we did, we had a meeting in here, and again, what I'm about to say has no reflection on any previous administration. Everybody does things different. Everybody has different goals. Everybody has different things. But we all have a common goal, and that is safety of our community. So, interestingly, the most challenging thing, my first year, my first 6 months, I was elected. I took over in 2015. And in the first 3 months, we had 2 snowmageddons. April came along, and we had the flood, which was preceded 2 days by a forest fire up Rodburn. The day after the flood was the Final Four. I had tickets to go to my cousin's house in Indianapolis and go watch the Final Four. UK was playing. So we had all this planned out. We had the flood the night before. Had the 2 snowmageddons after that, or before that, and then the fire, and then that day the KKK decides they're going to show up and protest. So in my first 4 months, I felt like I was literally tested under ice, water, and fire. And Guardian caught on fire 9 times that day. It took 6 different units from 6 different communities to come and help us put it out. It was the craziest week. But that just goes to show you. And then what happened later that summer, it's just been a really, really wild trip. So that's been challenging, but the beautiful thing about it is being in athletics as long as I have been and coaching, and my dad always coaching. And, I tell people all the time when I talk to young people, whether you believe it or not, if you have a mom and dad and you're part of a team from the very beginning of your life. And if you ever want to be successful, you're a part of a team somewhere down the line, always. And yeah, your individual success, but someone helps you get there. So what we did here is we have a great team. We have 70 employees. In my office right here, we have 8, including myself. And we have such a good team, and meaning that no person can do this job by themselves. I mean, it's people don't. It's not a 9 to 5 job. It's literally 7 days a week. And my phone, I'll get text at 2 in the morning. And I'm not saying that to complain. It's just that it's a challenge. But if you don't have people to help you and back you up, and so the first thing we did was we sat down in this room. We said we're going to keep people safe, safe, and safe. Those are the first 3 rules. After that, we're going to be in customer service, meaning the customers are our taxpayers, visitors, students, whatever. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try to help them with whatever questions they have, whatever concerns. So the most rewarding has been when somebody calls you with a problem, and they've called everybody else, and you're able through your team, not me at all. I've thrown out the word me, tried to the first year, and it's all we. And through the team we have, when you help somebody, it could be something simple. It could be an elderly lady who has trouble walking, and we help her through connections get a ramp. Or it could be something big where we have a land dispute. We've had a couple of those that have a lot of emotions on each side. Or it can be something, like where we had a North Wilson a couple years ago. North Wilson started falling in. And that was an emergency thing we didn't have budgeted for, and we went in and able to. But when you do those things, and it helps people, and people just come to you and say, "Oh man, I didn't know what we would do." And Abraham Lincoln has a quote, and I'll paraphrase, but it basically says, "The role of government is to do for people what they can't do themselves." And so that's the most rewarding. It's challenging every day. Just when I see people and they say, thanks for helping, or thanks your guys for doing this, or we have people on a garbage truck. We have people that a lot of folks wouldn't do that job, but they are so dedicated, and they do it the right way, and people just tell me all the time what great job we have. That's the most rewarding, is when you have a team all working in the same direction to make their place better. Most of the people that work for the city, ironically, don't live in the city. Most of them live outside the county. Some of them live in other counties. So when they take such great pride in somewhere they don't actually live at night, that shows you what kind of people we have. So that's the rewarding part of it. And along with the rewarding part, you have the challenges that allow you to ultimately get to the rewarding part. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It all flows together.
Okay. Well, I'd like to talk about one specific event in detail.
Mm-hmm.
And when the Supreme Court made marriage equality law of the land, there was some immediate backlash, which was to be expected. And from a mayoral standpoint, and that's what I want to emphasize, is what could you do as a mayor? What was your job as the mayor? How did you first react when one of our county officials chose not to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples?
Well, that's an awesome question. I'm going to back up one thing to the decision. The decision was made, and the Supreme Court's there to make that decision. We've got the most brightest and best, allegedly, there to make these decisions. So the decision was made, and there was no going back. What should have happened to make things flow smoother was, and I went to law school, and I've talked with a bunch of my buddies about this and different things, and they agree. What happened, the Supreme Court made that ruling, but they didn't give a way to implement that. Because, you got to remember, it came out in June, July. Most people most states don't go into session until January. Mm-hmm. So you had from July until January, what do we do? How do we do this? and most people don't go into special session on that. They're on summer break. So what the Supreme Court didn't do, and they should have done, I believe personally, is said, okay, look, here's our ruling. You've got till January to make adjustments, and then the states can do what they need to do to implement this, to either take away contradictory laws within the state. So that's what I wanted to let you know, that's what I think. And think about it. If that would have happened and would have allowed states to adjust in 6 months, we may not have had. And this was, we were at ground zero for that. No question. But it happened in other states too. Imagine if things would have been allowed. So I think that was one of the mistakes. You hate to ever criticize the Supreme Court because they're there because of who they are. But you see my point? So going into that though, once that happened and there was no really game plan on what to do, then it fell to states, it fell to local officials. Okay, what do we do? How do we do this? When it first happened, I'm a Christian. But I never have discriminated against anyone. So when that happened, I saw it from both sides, and I thought, okay, this is going to be a storm, one way or the other. Again, I know Miss Davis personally. I know what kind of a person she is. I've known her for a long time, and personally, I understood what she did. Professionally, it was a decision. Fortunately, I never had to make that decision. It was a decision I don't know what I would have done, honestly. I can tell you that with all honesty. Knowing both sides of the issue, having friends and colleagues and acquaintances on both sides of the issue, I don't know. I don't know what I would have done. But what we decided to do here at the city, we had passed the fairness ordinance, which outlawed any discrimination against anyone for jobs and for housing and all that. We were like the fourth city in the state to do that. So we have that. You know, that shows what we believe. And then when it came out, I got tons of calls immediately. Why don't you do something about this? And I kept all the letters. I got letters, emails from all over the country on both sides of the issues, wanting me to do this as mayor. So what I tried to explain, we met very quickly. We huddled together with city council, and I said, what are we going to do? What's our message? And our message was, we are a fairness ordinance town. We believe in no discrimination against anybody for any reason, and we do not have the control administratively over any county official. Now, at that point, that was all we agreed to say, and my job then was, since the county courthouse is in city limits, my job was to make sure what started brewing did not end up in violence or destruction of property or any kind of harm. So the first thing we did when people started coming in and started moving in is we met with our law enforcement. And we had tremendous coordination between our local Morehead Police Department, MSU Police Department, State Police, Sheriff's Office, and some other organizations. And we got together, and fortunately, it was not the people who were from here that caused any of the ruckus. Ironically, when it first happened, you had the folks on one side of the issue, the folks on the other side of the issue. They actually shared water. They sang songs back and forth, chanted back and forth. But you never had anybody fighting. And it wasn't until it started slowly becoming a big national media spotlight was on it. Then you had these people. I'm not going to use the word, but people who were, let's just say, fringe on extreme on both sides, coming in with signs that said very, very, very derogatory things towards one side. Other people coming in almost militant. So at that point, once it kind of got beyond our local folks, that's when it got a little tenuous. We really had to watch and make sure those folks, because these folks, we found out on both sides now, were paid antagonists. Matter of fact, when it died down, some of the folks on one side went to, if you remember, not long after that was the shooting out in, was it St. Louis? The African American gentleman it was a big thing. There was riots out there not long after that happened, and a police involved shooting. And this one group, they were getting paid to go there next. So that was the toughest thing. Number one, making sure that we came out when people they came to us from all over the world. We just talked about it before our interview. Al Jazeera was here. Russian radio was here. Every major news outlet in the nation was here. And so, they're here covering the topic, and the topic was county clerk does not allow gay marriages. Okay, what do we do as a city? We have no dog in the fight, so to speak, but our job was to keep everybody safe. Our job was to put on the best face of Morehead we could. And what people asked me, they said, what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to? I said, be yourself. I've lived here for, at the time, 48 years. I'm sure there have been discriminatory acts against blacks, against people who are homosexual, against people from different races. I know there has been, but there hasn't been any major crime that I ever knew of about hate crime that had been ever prosecuted here. I'm not saying that things weren't said and all that, and we people are people, but what I'm saying is we're a pretty forgiving and loving community. We have the most progressive university in the state, really. As far as the state university, we are very progressive with our hospital because we have international staff from all over the world to come in, of all different religions, all different things. So we're kind of, for a small town, we've got a lot of progressive culture here, multicultural. Probably the most multicultural in the state of Kentucky, east of Lexington, I would argue. And we're a local hub, too, for about 7 or 8 different communities. So all that being said, we get along pretty well. We really do. And we have. And I told people, I said, be yourselves. Don't let outsiders come in and, number one, antagonize you to do something or to say something or to react a certain way. Keep the focus on what you do every day. Treat people like you've always treated them. And even after it was over with, Dakota, they asked me, what can we do to heal the town? I said, I think time will take care of that. Just treat everybody with respect. If someone has a different belief than you do, religious, financial, cultural, whatever, respect the difference and get along. And so, really, the couple months there when it was hot and heavy, really it's been pretty back to normal. And I think we've learned from it. I think we've learned tolerance beyond what we thought we were, and that's on both sides of the issue. I think people who were very strong for gay marriage have learned more about why people on the other side feel the way they do, and I think folks that were against gay marriage have learned a lot about that. And after all, in the end, if we learn from it, first of all, thank goodness no one was hurt, didn't have any violence, or didn't have any looting and all the stuff that happens everywhere else. But I think we all learned from that. I know I did, because I had a lot of conversations with people on both sides privately about it, and changed some of my feelings a little bit and perceptions. I think it changed. So in the long run, I think if you bring it up now in just a coffee shop, somebody goes, I'm glad that's over with. But on the other hand, we don't look back at it. It wasn't a tragedy, thank goodness. Now, were feelings hurt? Of course. Were people felt like they were discriminated against? Of course. And that was almost on both sides because of the way the legal battle went out. So, I look at it as a huge learning experience for our town, but I'm proud of us because I think we came out of it better. I think we came out of it more understanding, and I think we came out of it, believe it or not, a more unified. It really did, because the only people that were dividing us were the outsiders. Now, we're I don't know how many churches we have. I forget how many churches. It's so many, and I wish I knew the number. But if you look in the newspaper, you see on Wednesday, I think it's Tuesdays they come out, and we're in the Bible Belt, okay. But we also have, like I said, through the university and through some other things, a multicultural. So but that didn't all happen last year, 2 years ago. I mean, university's been one of the most progressive universities for many, many years. So we've lived pretty well together. May not agree, but I don't know. That was my take from it. I think we learned from it. I think it made us better. I think it made us more cohesive, and I think it made us more understanding. Now, people were greatly affected personally on both sides of the issues. The folks that were turned away to be married, the person who turned them away. I mean, you could say, I don't put myself in either one of their positions, but I know they both groups suffered a lot, emotionally, and what we have to remember is we live in a free country, thank the good Lord, from God to our military men and women who preserve that right to live in a free country. We live in a country to have free speech and to disagree and to move on. And so, but free speech sometimes doesn't mean it's not hurtful speech and other things. So I know that there were some deep wounds, but I think from what I understand, from what I see and talk to people, it's been in the long run, a very good learning experience, and I believe it's made us better as a community. Short answer, right?
Yeah, I want to touch on community relations a little more later on. But if we could go back to the protests, I really wanted to see if you expected the issue to gain as much attention as it did.
I really didn't, because I believe I follow all the news feeds. I follow all the news feeds, and try. During that time, I was, we were just trying to read everything we could read on it, because I really expected, if I would have had a map with a dart, I wouldn't have thrown it to Morehead, Kentucky. I would have expected places like California or places like Texas, which are kind of polar opposite on that issue, to be more. But I think the fact that we were the first one to have someone come out and make that decision as an official, then that's where the bees swarmed to, you know what I mean? So no, I never expected that, and we never thought it was going to grow as big as it was, because honestly, I kept waiting for it to pop up other areas. And I think what happened, it was such a polarizing decision, right or wrong, that no one knew how to react, and they all found a beta test. Okay, let's see how they do it. And I think we provided that. I think if Kim Davis would have made the decision she made 2 weeks later, someone would have made it somewhere else, and they would have got it. But the way it happened with us being in the Bible Belt, and we were portrayed early on as a backwards town and bigots and all this. And it's interesting that if you look at some of the early national coverage, print coverage, which I read everything, and they, as it progressed, and we had people from major news organizations, I talked to them, that had stayed here almost the entire time. In a weird way, it was an economic boon. We don't ever want to go out and get economic boon and tourist attraction for something as controversial. I'm not making light of it, but some of them stayed here in our community, and by the time they left, they wrote some of the best pieces. What a great community. So it was unexpected, and there was no, Dakota, we had no manual. Okay, how do we handle this? Just like with KK showed up, I told you back earlier, how do you handle that? There's no you just have to protect your folks, you have to communicate with your folks, and you have to make sure the situation stays under control. And you have to allow people to exercise their freedom of speech rights. And, what the county did, they allowed that area down there in front of the courthouse, and I commend them for that, is they allowed that to be a freedom of speech zone. And folks could come and do that. It was as long as it was peaceful, and it was. As long as you don't impede traffic or people's ability to move, it was. And so, that's, whether you agree with the situation or not, or whoever's protesting, that's America. And you couldn't do that other places. So we didn't know how to deal with it. Didn't expect it to be that big, but I thought when it was all said and done, probably could things have been different, I'm sure, but probably it went about as well as it could, knowing that, like I said, we didn't have any major fights. No one was hurt. All those things. Those are things that go through my mind. We want to make sure all angles are covered. Like, for example, if you remember, late in the game, there was a church group, allegedly, that was going to come and protest on campus. I don't know if you remember that or not. The Westboro bunch. So when they send, it's funny, they send out, just like the KKK does, they send out press releases to the local law enforcement. You know why? so they can be protected. They want you to know, so you're there to protect them from. Ironic, but again, it's free speech. We live in a society, so when we hear those things, then we see those again as potential antagonists. So we always work very well with all of our coordinating agencies, and again, just I know what we have learned. We've learned a lot about how to prepare for things like this. Hopefully we never have anything as controversial. We may have, but we've learned through just going through it the first time. And it all goes back to what I said earlier, teamwork. We had to work as a team with all agencies and with the protesters. Think about it. People on both sides, if they did not act in a normal way, the local folks, then, if it was such a heated, angry thing, it could have been awful. We could have been talking about a tragedy right now, but we haven't. So, we dealt with it the best we could, and we had a lot of cooperation on both sides, and I think that was the key. And fortunately, thank God, it ended up peaceful.
So, do you think the county was prepared for this issue?
I don't think so. I don't think anybody could really prepare for it unless you've been through it before. And there really wasn't. If you think about it, there really wasn't a precedent set anywhere in the United States for this type of thing, unless you go back to the L.A. riots in the '60s. If you go back to some of the NAACP stuff that happened, some of those things back in the 60s where there was a lot of violence and all that, but that wasn't, that was on a much more grander scale, and this, even though it got nationwide coverage, it was an isolated incident. I really believe that the nation was wanting to know, because, like I said, the Supreme Court's decision was it was straightforward in what it said, but it didn't give you, there was no, okay, here's what's next. And so it left everybody to themselves. And so once that happened, I do commend Cecil Watkins. I do commend Dr. Walter Blevins and Judge Exeg. I commend all those folks for handling it the right way, and for learning on the run, and for being able to organize so quickly and get it to where they can handle it as much as they could, with still allowing people to have their rights.
So you've talked a little bit about the media coverage, that some news agencies kind of hounded you.
They did.
And other elected officials, but then some wrote about the great peaceful town that Morehead is.
They did.
So overall, do you think the media coverage was fair and appropriate?
I think it ended up that way. I think the beginning, just like it was such a hot topic, how many times do we hear, and I'm not comparing the two, and I don't want you to think this, but I'm just making an example. How many times do you hear of a controversial shooting, and people jump in, they rush to judgment, and then by the time the whole thing's over with, the facts have changed, facts, as they think they are to what they really are. So I believe at the beginning we probably got some, maybe a little unfair coverage just because we're Kentucky and Eastern Kentucky, and they got the stereotypes, and and she wears a long, skirt, and there's this about, and I think just the stereotypical first reaction, selling news, boom, and then once people and really dug into the issue and really got to know the people, I think it ended up fair. I think in the long run, we from the most reputable places, like I told you off air when we were talking, the Washington Post, I think, did one of the best articles. They had contacted me and early and didn't know the whole constitutional elected official process and how you get removed. They thought, well, the mayor, he can just tell them to leave and fire him. Well, no. Well, the fiscal court, no. I mean, there's a whole process there. And I explained the whole thing. Oh, well, we didn't know. Thank you. And then they wrote a very positive thing. I had other people, like I told you earlier, who came in and they just wanted the dirt, controversy. In the long run, the longer people stayed here, even the television media talked about, hey, this is really a nice town. People here are nice. The town didn't implode over it. You didn't have, fights. You didn't have all the different things you expected in such a hot topic issue. But I would say, now other people may have differing views, but I would say overall it ended up probably giving us a fair light because of the way we handled it, basically. The way our town was able to get through it and be able to do it in a relatively peaceful manner.
Okay. So I think one of the things that many of us learned, including myself, about this issue, you said the Washington Post had questions about the constitutionality and the local government aspect of it. I think that's one of the things that many of us learned is that we don't really know much about how local, county, and state governments works. And so if you could you just walk me through like the conundrum that you guys are in? Like what could have been done with this? Who had the authority to deal with it, and who didn't, basically?
Well, the best of my understanding from the research I did and talking to folks was that, that office is a constitutionally elected official, okay? She does not technically have a boss at the county. She does not work for the fiscal court. Just like here in Morehead, the fiscal court has 4 magistrates and a judge executive. In the city, we have 6 city council members and a mayor, okay? The mayor has authority to hire and fire any employee in the any non-elected official. That's the key. All right. Now, I cannot remove city council members. Only city council members could do that. Now, I can be removed by city council members. It's a kind of an impeachment process. On the county level, where a lot of your people that work there are county elected officials, it's different. Elected officials don't have a boss like they do, quote unquote, a typical job. Everybody said, well, fiscal court can just vote her out. No, they can't. It's different in the county, where the only thing that the citizens, or the city council could do, they could impeach me, for example. They can't impeach anybody else. Well, guess what? Beside the city council, I'm the only elected official. You see, in the county, sheriff, PVA, county clerk, county attorney, there's a lot of elected officials. So what happens then, that refers to the state. And it really becomes an issue with state legislature. They have to kind of come in and act. If she or any other state elected official was doing something that was illegal, then they could be charged and put in jail. And you saw that happen briefly. Okay, but even then, until they were constitutionally removed from a constitutional legislative body. For example, there was a judge executive several years ago. I can't remember the name. It was down in the southeastern part of the state who had been accused of embezzlement or something, and they arrested him. He remained judge executive until he was acquitted. He ran the county from the jail, and he was eventually acquitted and came back. And only if he'd been found guilty by a court of law, then he would have been removed by law by the legislature. You see what I'm saying? So it wasn't a cut and dry employer-employee benefit situation where it was. Kentucky is a at-will state, so you can be fired unless you have a specific contract. Most people can be fired as an at-will employee for any reason, any time. Wasn't the case with that. So when you're a constitutionally elected official, you have certain rights, and really it kind of gives you, you're elected by the people, so you have to be removed by someone who's elected by the people. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that's what I explained to them. It wasn't as simple, even if there was such an office as city court clerk, which we have one, but if there would have been an elected office, we couldn't do anything. So that was the whole point is, look, this is a decision made by someone who is elected by the people, and it was a decision that came down based on her religious beliefs, and it went through the whole process. So there was no simple fix here, and they said, well, then the judge executive can marry people unless she doesn't. Well, that got really complicated too, because she has to be seen to be incapacitated to carry out her duties. Even if she's in jail, she has deputies who are sworn in to fulfill her duties when she's not there. Like with me here, if something happens to me and I become incapacitated, I have an executive officer that is our city attorney that can fill in for me, and I have a legislative officer from the legislative body, which is city council, who can fill in as well for meetings and things like that. So it's not a simple fix, and people who didn't understand that, I'm going to tell you, I got tons of phone calls The best phone call I got was from a gay man in Seattle. He called me. He was a military veteran. Left a big long message. Of course, I was screening my calls. You just don't know. So I called him back, and he blew his mind that I called him back. And we had a 15-minute discussion about the whole thing. Told him what I just told you. He had no clue because the people in the media didn't do their research, and they were saying da 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 without going back. The Washington Post, like I said, they ended up doing the best job, and then people followed suit after them. They kind of took off from them. They did the best job. But we had a great conversation. I thanked him for his service. We talked about, and he told me he comes through Kentucky once a year, and he's going to stop by Morehead and pay us a visit. Now, whether he ever does, I don't know. But that goes to show you, here's a guy who had strong beliefs, but once he understood the process, he understood then the frustration was, well, she can't just simply be fired. Then it became okay, how do we change the law so that, that's what it should have been all about. Because it wasn't like somebody who said, I don't like the color of your skin, so I'm not going to do this. That's where it became a very, very hot topic, because people were equating race with sexual preference or religious preference or whatever. And you see how, like I said, it was when it first started, people were just a feeding frenzy. They didn't know how to handle it. So the best thing we could do is educate them to the best of our ability. And once they did that, then you started seeing people starting to realize then, okay, it's not a simple thing as you're not doing what we told you to do, leave. And some people couldn't get their minds wrapped around that. Just fire her, do this. Well, and you understand their frustration, they're emotional on both sides, and you just had to try to educate them. So it was, I like the word you used, it was a conundrum, because you were kind of like, you want to be sensitive to their frustration, you want to be sensitive to their beliefs, but at the same time, you never want to say somebody's uneducated. What I always said is, well, you're not quite informed here. And I sent people to the state website, many people, and they went and read the law on that. And that's a big part of what goes on. We get in situations, we do it all the time. I do it all the time. We're human. We get in emotional situations where we don't know the details. We make an emotional decision based on emotional, feeling at the time. And once that subsides, then you get down to where the smoke clears and you get down to the details and the law or the regulations or whatever it is. And I think sometimes it takes a while to do that, but in the end, it ended up being a positive.
So you've talked before about how you don't think the community at large has changed all too much, that the issue kind of settled down and we're back to
Go ahead.
being the way we were before. We're a forgiving community. What about outsiders looking in? Do you think that outsiders looking in now view Rowan County as either this place of I should avoid there because they have a lot of conflicts, or maybe this is a discriminatory county? And do you think that outsiders have a different view of Rowan County now, and do you think that has maybe affected tourism?
That's an excellent question, because I talked to the MSU president about this actually, and he came out and made a very strong statement about how he representing the university, how they feel, and people wanted me to do the same thing for the tourism reasons. I said, well, look, if people know who you really are. We all have our perceptions. We all say, well, don't go to this neighborhood, it's a bad neighborhood. Don't go to this neighborhood, or don't do this or don't do that or whatever, and that's fine. I think when people look at the way the coverage ended up again, and I do think we've changed in a positive way, in that I think that we have learned from it, and I think it brought us together actually instead of splitting us apart in the end. But as far as did it affect, I'm sure it did. I'm sure there are people now that have avoided that. But since then, just on the narrow subject of gay marriage, let's go to that. Since then, we've had, this year we'll have our second Pride Festival here. We had one last year. Actually, it was a 2-day thing. They're actually going to have it again. We were just recently, and you see all these, I don't know how much of them are social media driven or how much of them are actual news article driven. I don't know for sure, but we recently said that we're one of the most friendliest communities in the state, college town wise, or our size city. I forget the difference they said for the LGBTQ community, and so they wouldn't be saying that, I don't think. And again, everybody's got their opinion. I'm sure there's some who don't, but we wouldn't be able to do these things, or people wouldn't be recognizing that if it was a unsafe or bigoted community. Now, some people, you'll never change their mind. Some people never want to go to California and visit because of whatever. Some people never want to go to Las Vegas and visit because of whatever. Some people, you'll never change their mind. I think going back to what we all decided after it was all over with, to be ourselves, to show, if you do that continually, and people will come around. I think some people may stay away forever. That's fine. I think the majority of people that have looked at it from a reasonable perception, in other words, took it from the beginning of that summer to the end of that fall when everything died down and gone back, and what's happened since then. But the fact that we are still considered the most progressive town east of Lexington. Our university is very progressive. I think it's probably hurt some. There's no doubt, but I think overall it's probably not been a noticeable dent. What we need to do, and this is a good point, I'm glad you. What we need to do, probably to find out on an economic standpoint, is probably take the summer before that happened and look at our tourism type events and dollars, if we could break them down like that, and then look at the summer after that event and see economically if it. But there's a lot of factors that go into that. But if we could just do that, maybe get a baseline and see. I'm sure there's some change, but to be honest with you, and dealing with tourism every week that I do with the Chamber of Commerce, all the different meetings we go to, there's not been, oh my gosh, this is killing us. There's never been panic. And in a way, I think that people see it is, that little town, they had a lot of stuff going on, and they got. They're better for it. It's happened. It's made it better. So I think for as many people who said, I'm never going to that town, they're bigots. I think there's just as many people saying the way this ended up, I believe they are. Look what they came through.
All right, so we've talked quite a bit about how the town's changed, how many issues about the town itself, but we haven't really talked about you. And
okay.
I want to know if you've changed any because of this event.
You know what? When it first happened, I'm gonna be honest with you. I made a mistake. Being a Christian and being believing a certain way, I made a Facebook post the night the decision came out. And it was a mistake, and I took it down, and it wasn't a hate related, it wasn't anything like that, but it was a very, it was the pot was too hot to touch. In other words, it was a very raw issue on both sides. I had some friends from both sides contact me about it. I had some friends who were pro gay marriage, who have remained my friends, I'm happy to say, and we had a long discussion about that. And I told them that it was an emotional mistake, and they forgiven me. And since then, we've become closer. And so what I've learned is it's tough being an elected official when my job as an elected official was not to convert everybody to Christianity when I was a mayor. My job was not to get everybody to do that. My job was to lead by example, keep the community safe, help us grow, help us work together, be a team concept. Now, if I do what I'm supposed to be doing, then people will notice and they may follow what you do or they may not. So being an elected official in a small town and having, I post on my Facebook account, I post scripture every day that I receive on a scripture email chain, and I do it. It's for me and it's for friends and different things. But it's so hard in an issue like that to express yourself as a mayor as opposed to express yourself as an individual. If I'm in New York City and I express myself as a mayor and I say I'm against this or I don't think this is right, well, they'll burn the town to the ground. If I do it on my Facebook account in New York, they probably, some people will okay, and it won't be that big of a deal. In Morehead, there's no separation in a small town between my personal Facebook account and what I put on the city Facebook account, because I put events and things on there. But that's what I've learned. I've learned that being a public official is a tightrope. In other words, I am because of what I believe, and I'm here, I believe, because of the God's plan for my life. But at the same time, you get into the whole, are you supposed to do this, supposed to do that? That's not my job as a mayor. And the Bible says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. In other words, if your government's there and you're supposed to do what you're supposed to do under those circumstances. So the toughest thing I learned was, on a subject like that, or any subject, make sure personal feelings don't crisscross and intermesh with your job responsibility as a mayor. And that's a tough thing, you know what I mean? And because, and what I told everybody after that Facebook post, and this is hard to talk about because it hurt a lot of feelings, and that Facebook post was simply a quote from Leviticus, which is probably one of the harshest quotes in the Old Testament about that subject. And it was the wrong thing to do. And it was, and because it was half the people reacted a certain way when they saw the decision, half the people reacted a certain way, and it was wrong. So what I've learned, if nothing else, is to express my personal feelings, whatever it is, and make sure it's not done in a situation or around a subject, a hot topic, a timely topic that can be construed as that is me being a mayor. But my hometown, I know a lot of people, and it's impossible to do that, but I have learned that such issues, people know who I am, they know what I believe in. I don't need to do what I did. So that was a very tough lesson. As a 48-year-old man, I learned, and I tell kids all the time, I speak to middle school kids, I said, look, I make mistakes every day. Just because you get older don't mean you quit making mistakes. And so that has been something that has helped me, because it wasn't that I hated anybody or I discriminated against anybody. It was just a strong feeling I had this way. So what I explained to people from there is, look, I don't hate anybody, and I'll never discriminate against anybody, ever. But it's a tough thing when you do certain things and it's taken into context by one side or another side. It's hard to explain. You know where I'm getting at, right? When we talked, and you called me about this interview, that was some of the tough things I learned through that. And, because I believe a certain way does not mean I hate the other side. And that was the toughest thing to get through with this. And it was on both sides. If disagreement does not equal hate. But at the time, it was hotter than a firecracker. Everybody on both sides, well, you disagree, you must hate. No. But the emotions were so strong that it took a while, for that to get down. You had hate before you had debate. Am I right? And it took a long time to get to that point. So that's what I think I've learned. That's how I've become better. And like I said, I've got friends who called me out on it right away, and we had a long discussion and a great discussion. And I have since, I feel like I've made amends, but at the same time, I still have to be aware at all times.
All right, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I appreciate the opportunity to help chronicle this. It was a historical event in our society, in our community, and I think years from now, even though the original decision may be argued forever, the original decision that got us to there, I think history will show that our community learned from it, and our community has moved on, and our community has been better for it. Just simply as from a standpoint of coming together And like myself, many people have learned on both sides of the issue. And even those in the middle who wouldn't take a side, they've learned. So history will show that things happen. You go through pain, growing pains, and if you learn from it and you get on and you prosper from it eventually, then it's almost worth it. So I think that in the long run, we will look back at this and see that it's a positive thing overall.
Well, I'd like to thank you again for taking the time to meet with us. I think the perspective of the executive officials of our county and our city are extremely important to our project.
Well,
Glad to get you.
I appreciate having the opportunity, and I thank you what you do. You're doing something very important, and you have to document these things. Like you said, if there's ever a lapse in it, then those are things that 30 years from now, that we do these things and we document these things so we can learn from them and hopefully not repeat them.
Yeah.
Some of them.
All right. Thanks again.
All right.